I pulled into the parking lot behind the courthouse, the same one I used to drive by with Julian when things were good, or at least when I still believed they were. The cold Indiana air bit at my cheeks as I stepped out, clutching a worn leather bag and a manila folder packed with documents. My boots hit the pavement with purpose, though inside my hands trembled just enough to remind me this wasn't a normal Tuesday. Through the glass doors, I spotted them instantly. Julian's parents, perfectly dressed as if for church. His mother laughed, her pearls catching the light like they had something to prove. His father stood beside her, too still, too perfect. A few others surrounded them, exchanging looks, glances that made me feel like I was walking into a stage play I hadn't rehearsed for. Even the receptionist's eyes flicked from me to them, then back, like she knew how lopsided this whole thing was. It was the first time I'd seen them since they suggested I leave the house. Suggested. What a word. It had felt like an eviction dressed in pearls and fake sympathy. I straightened my coat. This wasn't their living room. This was court. And I wasn't the same woman they'd quietly packed away. Inside the courtroom, the air tightened. I stepped through the door and the judge glanced up, momentarily pausing mid-page. My heels clicked too loudly on the tile. My mother-in-law turned her head ever so slightly, then rolled her eyes, a gesture that stung not because it was dramatic, but because it was expected. Julian's father avoided my eyes completely. I walked in like I'd meant to be there all along, silent, measured, a deliberate threat in quiet packaging. Even the clerk stopped typing. They thought I'd come in trembling, asking questions, needing direction. I didn't. I came in like someone with a purpose. They thought I'd be broken, I thought, sliding into the wooden bench without a word. They thought wrong. But before this moment, before the courtroom silence, there was that dinner 6 months ago. One of those family dinners with dimmed lighting and sharp silverware, the kind where smiles are too wide and conversations are landmines. My sister-in-law, arms crossed, said it like a joke. "You've had it good, haven't you, living off the family generosity?" I blinked. Then I laughed, quiet, tired. "I pay the bills. Half of them I take care of your mother." But no one looked up, not even Julian, my own husband. Then came the dagger wrapped in silk. His mother, her voice all sugar, said, "Maybe it's time you find your own space, for your independence." I chewed the inside of my cheek until it hurt. That night I packed before sunrise. A week later an envelope arrived. No return address, just my name, typed. Inside, a statement, a bank account I didn't recognize. Opened in my name, I blinked, read it again. Then again, I called a lawyer I knew from college. Cheap, quiet. I needed quiet. "This could look like money laundering," he said, tapping his pen, "and it's traceable to Julian and his father. They weren't just pushing me out, they were setting me up." So I documented everything, every email, every receipt, every hushed phone call. My lawyer warned me, they're not aiming to hurt you emotionally. They're painting you as the villain, quietly, efficiently. Back in court, I took my seat on the plaintiff's side, alone for now. Julian whispered something to his mother. She didn't respond, just stared. I placed my folder neatly on the table, pressed record on the pen I brought, just in case. You never know who's really listening. The judge looked up again. "Ms. Marlin, are you representing yourself today?" I nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor, for now." A rustle moved through the courtroom like a ripple on water. Some eyes widened, others narrowed. Julian blinked, leaned back slightly. He wasn't expecting that. Neither was I until I did it. I sat tall. My heart pounded, but my voice wouldn't shake. That was the difference this time. They underestimated me. I thought of something my dad used to say when things got hard and people got ugly. "You can't shame the unashamed." That was their plan. Count on my silence, count on my fear, count on me leaving before it got messy. But I wasn't leaving. Silence isn't grace when it protects the guilty. For years I'd been polite, accommodating, careful, not anymore. The pen in my hand clicked softly. No turning back. Let them stare, let them whisper, let them wonder what I know. I got the call on a Thursday. It was Lenora, Julian's sister. Her voice was syrupy, the kind of sweet that sticks to your hands and makes you want to wash up after. She said they wanted to clear the air, invited me to brunch that Sunday. It's time we all had a proper talk, Iris. Just family. Family. The word hit me strange, like someone playing music, off-key and pretending not to notice. I didn't answer right away. I let the voicemail sit, replayed it a few times over the weekend. Her tone didn't match her words. That kind of disconnect only ever meant one thing: performance. A therapist I once saw said, "Sometimes people invite you to their table just to serve you the blame." I went, not for them, but for the silence afterward, to hear what they said when they thought I was listening. I wore blue, no jewelry, no makeup, just keys in one pocket and questions in the other. Sunday came grey, the kind of sky that presses down on your shoulders. I pulled into the driveway of Julian's parents' house. Same manicured lawn, same red door, same tightness in my chest. Octavia answered with a smile I'd seen in framed Christmas photos. "You look, well, stress must be good for your figure." I smiled back, thin. "Guess it's the fasting." Inside, the table was set like always, the heavy dishes, the creased linen, the smell of something buttery, hiding something bitter. Lenora made a show of pulling out a chair for me, then leaned in close. "You still job hunting?" Loud enough for everyone to hear. Julian said it's been, 3 months now? 3 months. I left work 5 weeks ago. Julian didn't look at me, didn't say a word. His father cleared his throat. "We just want stability, Iris. For the kids, for the future." There were no kids, no pregnancy, nothing on the horizon but a slow divorce and colder winters. I sat through it. 40 minutes of subtle digs and sideways glances. I chewed my food, didn't choke, and I recorded the entire thing, pen in my pocket, mic on. They weren't trying to reconnect, they were building a file. Later that night, back in my temporary apartment, the one that smelled like old carpet and fresh start, I opened my laptop and checked my email. There it was, an accidental forward from Julian's inbox, meant for his accountant. The subject line, "Finalized transfer." Attached was the deed to our house, now in Julian's name alone, dated 3 weeks before I moved out. We bought that house together. I'd been paying the mortgage, mowing the lawn, painting the porch, and there it was in his words, "Make sure her name stays off, she'll forget to ask." My hands started to shake, but I didn't cry. I saved the email twice, then on a flash drive, then in the cloud. That's when the fear stopped being hypothetical. That's when it became paperwork. I laid awake that night, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering if I was making all this up, if I was overreacting, if maybe, somehow I'd misread everything. But the email was real. The brunch had happened, and people don't hide things unless they're afraid you'll find them. I created a folder on my desktop, named it Truth in all caps. Anytime I second-guessed myself, I opened it. Every message, every file, every recorded conversation, it was all there. They weren't messy, they weren't careless, they were calculated. I stopped answering texts right away, started replying with questions instead of explanations. At the next church potluck, I noticed who only talked to me when Julian wasn't looking, who avoided my eyes, who smiled too hard. Patterns, that's what I began collecting. I started journaling, not feelings, but facts. Who said what, where they sat, the tone of their voice, the timing of their glances. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was observing, like chess. You don't win by striking fast. You win by waiting for your opponent to think you've stopped playing. They'd been loud, I went quiet. They'd been careless, I became deliberate. And silence, it wasn't weakness anymore, it was armor. I remembered a quote I'd read once. Maybe it was in a book, or someone said it on TV. Doesn't matter now, it's stuck. A lion doesn't need to roar to be feared. Sometimes it just watches. And that's what I did. I watched, I waited, I remembered. Because once people show you who they are, you don't forget. You believe them. Late autumn settled in with a cold snap I can still feel on my skin. Even in my apartment, the air felt frozen, like the walls were holding breath. I hadn't spoken to Julian in 3 days. No messages, no returned calls, not a hint about court. The silence pressed down, heavier than any accusation. Outside, wind rattled windows. Inside, my doubt hummed louder than any voice. People started talking around me, mutual friends offering vague advice. Maybe talk to him first. Maybe you should let it go. Their words hovered like ghosts, but I sensed something shifting deeper, not in conversations, but in what wasn't said. I felt lines drawing under currents I couldn't see. The ground was cracking, and I was standing straddling two truths. That night, my phone lit up with a voicemail. A woman's voice, Octavia's, breathing hard, urgent. She's still clueless. You need to lock this down before discovery. Get your father to sign it tonight. A pause then, and delete this. You always forget. I swear. The line cut off. My stomach clenched. I listened again. She didn't hesitate. She was planning. I forwarded the message to a backup email, renamed it maskoff1.weave. Later, I dug into a shoebox of old letters. Julian's handwriting, faded ink. In one letter, he confessed he feared being a puppet to her expectations. In another, he wrote jokingly, "If I ever treat you like they treat me, knock some sense into me." I reread those pages until the edges blurred. The warning signs had always been there. I just let romance blur their edges. I dialed Julian's number, needing his voice. He answered with a lazy tone. "Everything's taken care of, babe. Don't stress yourself." I asked how. His voice tightened. Just, "Don't worry." That phrase stung. It didn't soothe. It shut me down. I didn't press further. Instead, I lay awake, replaying every conversation. That night changed something in me. I stopped waiting for apology, for rescue. I stopped reading old texts. I lit a candle and began listing everything I knew, dates, statements, patterns, not out of fear, but out of clarity. I whispered, "This isn't a love story, it's survival." From that point on, I became the archivist of my own life. Silence shifted. What was once weaponized against me became my shield. I refused to defend. I refused to react. I documented. They underestimated silence, but sometimes the person sitting quietly is the one sharpening the knife. I stood alone in the courthouse hallway, just outside the main room. Heavy doors shut the whispers in, but they still bled through. Muffled voices, the squeak of a chair, the click of pens tapping on wood. A court assistant passed by me quickly, almost avoiding eye contact. His hands shook as he clutched a thick folder. He dropped it. As I knelt to help him gather the papers, my eyes caught a glimpse. Yellow highlights, bold phrases, revision clauses. Voidable in 30 days, plaintiff unaware. My throat tightened. These weren't just legal notes. These were setups. I kept my expression steady, slid the page back in, but not before slipping my phone into photo mode and snapping the section. No one looked my way. Their silence wasn't ignorance. It was intention. I didn't return the folder. I tucked it into my bag. If they wanted secrets buried, they shouldn't have dropped them at my feet. Minutes later, I was called into a procedural session. I stood behind the mic, calm, document in hand. "Your Honor, these papers include..." Click. Dead. The microphone cut out mid-sentence. The judge's screen flickered and went black. Low murmurs stirred, a cough. Someone whispered, "Here we go again." Octavia didn't bother hiding her smirk. Cassius leaned back like he'd seen it coming. I raised my voice without shouting. "Your Honor, I believe the court deserves to see..." Still no sound from the mic, but my words weren't for them anymore. They were for me. The courtroom technician fiddled with the system and the judge waved him off. "Let her continue." So I did, loud and clear. Back home that night, I sat in my study. Lights dimmed, tea cold. I laid out every file I'd gathered, versions of contracts, printed emails, screen captures. Then I cross-checked metadata. Something snapped into focus. One file, the so-called original, was time-stamped after the final version. They'd faked the file, faked its age. Closer inspection showed signature irregularities. The I in my name curved differently. Pen pressure varied, a copied signature. I took screenshots, backed it up twice. The next morning, I met Angus privately at the courthouse copy room. I asked him plainly, "Why are there two deeds with different dates?" He froze. I think the files got corrupted. I don't know. I opened my laptop. Side-by-side overlays. Even a child could see the edit. Angus deflated. Cassius said it was just to keep things clean. Your name complicates the taxes. I didn't know they'd push it this far. A knock. Cassius walked in. "Iris," he said low, "you really don't want to go further down this road. It's not going to end the way you think." I closed my laptop slowly. "You already regret thinking I wouldn't notice." The fear came later. Not loud, not crushing, just a subtle flicker behind my ribs. Threats of court consequences, slander, character, assassination. But I'd already crossed the threshold. Fear couldn't keep me silent, and not anymore. If they're this desperate to shut me up, I said to myself, then I must be holding something they're scared of. I wrote one sentence on a card and slipped it into my bag. If I'm interrupted again, I present these publicly. I wasn't bluffing, I was preparing. That evening, as the courthouse emptied and voices faded behind closing doors, I stepped outside, not hurried, not hiding. The wind had picked up, the trees didn't sway, they shivered. So did the paper in my hand, but my steps didn't. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about truth, and I was done whispering. The invitation came in the morning in a polite email from Octavia and Cassius via the community mediation service. At first, I thought maybe they meant it. Some attempt at reconciliation. The meeting was set in a bland conference room at the community centre, sunlight filtering through blinds that felt like prison bars. I sat at one end of the long table with Octavia and Cassius at the other, and a counsellor between us, stiff-backed and scribbling notes. Cassius started with small talk. Weather, local news, how the city council had passed a new ordinance. It felt intentional, filler. Then Octavia's voice softened. "I'm hoping you'll consider putting the past behind you," she said, as though she hadn't spent months burying me. I shook. "Which part exactly?" I asked. "The part where you forged papers, or where you arranged to silence me?" My spine straightened. They exchanged looks. The counsellor cleared her throat. Octavia's denial came instantly. She laid it out flat. "I don't know what you're talking about." She turned to the counsellor. "You know memory is not perfect. Emotions cloud the past." Cassius nodded. "She's under a lot of stress. Maybe she misunderstood something." That was their pivot. I stood, placing printed email headers on the table. Proof of coordination between them, drafts, forwarded threads. They shifted again. Octavia's voice rose. "Why are you so vindictive? Families forgive mistakes." The counsellor shifted uncomfortably, silent. No one would intervene. I realized there is no mediator here, only a stage. I stood on that stage. I collected their lies. That night, Julian insisted we have dinner at the house I once lived in. "Just the four of us," he said. I said yes, not because I trusted, but because I needed footage. My recorder came tucked into my bag. The dinner was warm at first, then it turned cold. Julian avoided eye contact. Octavia poured wine and in a calm voice said, "All this could end tonight if you'd stop acting like you're owed something." The words landed like stones. I pressed a button. The voicemail from that night, Octavia's voice, clear and cruel, echoed across the table. Utter silence. Julian's face drained. Cassius didn't flinch. I said gently, "I'm not spying, I'm documenting. You taught me well." Octavia snapped. "You think you have any right to do this?" I replied, "The right you refuse to give me." I rose and left. No hand trembles, no panic. Driving home, I felt clarity cut through the confusion. I don't have to be liked. I don't need their validation. I spent years hoping for respect. Now I strategize. I drafted a timeline for the court, attached recordings. For the first time in weeks, sleep came without nightmares. The line is drawn. I stand firm on the side that sees clearly. They were warned, not with anger, not with pleas, but with patience, with presence. Some people don't hear warnings, they feel the consequences. I walked into the courthouse early, gripping a USB drive, documents, and the weight of restraint. The judge was seated, reviewing motions. Octavia sat quietly, face composed, eyes narrowed as though I was the intruder. Cassius, with practiced ease, nodded as I passed. "Good morning, Ms. Marlin," he said, thin politeness stretched across his lips. I steadied myself, producer of my own fate. My folder marked Exhibit A video evidence rested against my hip. I inhaled. This was the moment, not for them, for me. When my name was called, I rose. The courtroom hushed. I inserted the USB. The screen flickered. The video played. Octavia's voice, crisp and damning, echoed. "I hid the original deed documents. You'll never see the real signatures. We'll correct this quietly before discovery." Silence crushed the room. The judge paused playback, looking between Octavia and me. Cassius sprang from his seat. "Objection! This was never disclosed," he barked. The judge frowned but allowed the playback to continue. Metadata lay open on the screen, timestamps, file history, verified audio. Octavia's cheeks drained of color. Her lips parted, the hush deepened. I exhaled. I watched their flinches, their unspoken panic. Whispers erupted, spectators leaned forward. The clerk toggled through files, eyes flicking at my exhibits. Cassius jabbed his finger. "Fabricated evidence," he snapped. I spoke steady. "I'm not fabricating, I'm revealing. Let the record speak for itself." Lenora's hand fluttered to her mouth. Octavia's posture stiffened. I held my ground. Minutes later, outside the courtroom, cameras swarmed, reporters nudged microphones under my chin. I said quietly, "Truth doesn't need hype, it just needs to be seen." Flashes exploded. I passed Octavia, who stared at the ground. Cassius lurched, then backed away. A reporter hissed, "Do you think she'll crack?" I answered, calm. Irrational ego rarely survives exposure. Back in my office, I scanned headlines and messages. The ripple was real. Calls from local newspapers, an attorney friend forwarding links. I drew my own timeline, mapping every shift in their story against my documents. I annotated discrepancies, flagged unstable alliances. I realized I didn't want just victory. I wanted justice to bend their world. I typed one line, "We don't fight evil, we cast light." I pressed send to secure a backup. A resolve stirred, a promise I would not stop until every piece of their fortress was cracked. They built their lies carefully. Today, the first fissure appeared. I met Mabel at a small cafe just off a side street, sunlight turning the table edges gold. She sat nervously, twisting a napkin between fingers, glancing over her shoulder like someone afraid of shadows. When I greeted her, she nodded, her eyes red but determined. "I have something that may shift the balance," she said, voice tight. I urged her softly to trust me. She pressed an envelope into my hand. Inside were photocopies, internal emails, ledger entries, notes where she overheard Octavia instructing changes to our documents. Tears threatened at her eyes. She whispered, "I didn't want to be part of this, but someone had to speak up." I placed a hand over hers. "Thank you, we're not done yet, but you've already done more than many." In that moment, something real tilted. Mabel's confession landed heavier than any accusation. She admitted she'd hidden these files for weeks, waiting for a moment when she believed it would matter. She confessed she once believed in family unity, trusted Octavia's public face, but her conscience outweighed allegiance. She told me of a meeting where Angus, voice low, said they had to remove her piece, meaning me, from the deeds. My pulse pounded behind my ribs as she spoke that line. I recorded every word, her voice trembled. "They'll come after me now," she said. I leaned in. "We protect you. This becomes legal record." She nodded, swallowed hard, courage rekindling. Evening came, and with it, a neighbourhood association meeting at the country club. The event was public, grand, polished. Octavia stood at the podium, ready to present Lenore with a community service award. I sat in the back, envelope and notes in my bag, watching. They had arranged this stage for performance, not reconciliation. Lenore's speech began. "To my dearest sister-in-law, someone we dearly missed." Her words hit like veiled sarcasm. Around the room, polite faces blinked. Whispers flickered at my name. Octavia's mask cracked, just a bit. I leaned back, watching the tension crowd the room. Then the printed program was handed out. My heart thudded. The header, Event Staff Iris Marlin. Lenore was billed as honorary chair. Gasps rippled. I stood. "Excuse me," I said. Voices hushed. I held up a copy of my original draft. In it I was special honoree. Octavia's first words. "Oh, an oversight." Cassius motioned toward staff. I ignored them. I raised my voice. "Why am I staff when I built half the planning?" The room shifted. Some faces went pale. Others stared. I leaned to the lectern. Mistakes like that happen when someone fears you deserve credit. The insult landed. Silence hung. Back home, betrayal felt strange, bitter and necessary. Mabel's turn had bolstered me, but exposed her to danger. I remembered a poem line, "To trust is to be vulnerable, to judge the defense of the heart." I realized that trust would no longer be blind. From now on, I'd trust in truth, not people. I mapped a list. Lenore, Angus, possible Julian suspicion. Who was threatened by me now? I whispered. I refuse to be defined by how they misname me. Clutching Mabel's envelope, I drifted to sleep. They tried to erase me in print, but I have witnesses. I have proof. The misnaming wasn't shame, it was invitation. I stepped out of that meeting stronger than I entered it. I arrived early, before the courtroom doors opened, stepping onto polished stone floors that echoed with my footsteps. My folder felt heavy. This was not about proof, it was about holding space. The gallery was already filling. Cameras, local reporters, curious faces. Octavia sat in the front row, her posture stiff, Cassius next to her adjusting his tie. The judge called proceedings to order with a stern voice. I stood, composed, and laid before him the letter of demand, the video evidence, Mabel's affidavit, every piece cross-referenced, marked. Cassius sprang to object, but the judge silenced him, saying he would hear me first. I exhaled. "Your Honour, I bring you truth, not theatrics," I said. A hush fell over the room, thick as winter's air. I reached into my bag and handed the judge a sealed envelope. "Please open it after the defence speaks," I said. Cassius tensed. The defence rose, launching into their version of events. Miscommunication, emotional strain, family misunderstandings. When they concluded, the judge broke the seal. Inside was Silas's handwriting, a letter addressed to Octavia, apologising for helping conceal deeds and asking for redemption. The judge read passages aloud. I covered for her sake. I never meant this to become war. A gasp moved through the gallery. Octavia's cheeks paled. I explained. That letter was locked in his safe. Mabel's copy survived. Cassius tried to object, but the judge held up a hand. The room tipped on its axis. Not finished, I asked for the original contract prior to its voidable alteration. I produced a draft showing my name as co-owner, fully vested. Cassius sneered. "That's inadmissible." I replied evenly. Drafts carry metadata. Metadata reveals dates. The record speaks. The judge called for an expert evaluation. Relief folded through me, not triumph, but the sure knowledge they couldn't escape this cornerstone. Then I faced Silas, who sat quietly behind the spectators. "Do you have anything to add?" I asked. He stood slowly, withdrew a folded paper from his pocket and passed it to the court clerk. Cassius gasped. Octavia shifted. The paper was addressed to me, written when he first became aware of the scheme. I unfolded it and read one line. I watched what we did to you, and I felt I betrayed the only person who never asked for more than what they deserved. My voice remained steady. The judge's pen hovered. The room stilled. This wasn't drama. It was accountability. I sat back in my chair. The pressure I had carried eased slightly, but I did not smile. I held the silence like a blade, knowing now how to direct it. I remembered, courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's what persists when fear retreats. This moment was not the end. It was a recalibration. I envisioned lining up motions, preparing witnesses, closing loopholes. I whispered to myself, "This is my life. I decide how it ends." They had expected me to collapse under scrutiny. Instead, the letter, the contract, the hidden apology all severed their control. I stepped to the back of the courtroom, straightened and waited. The gavel hovered above the bench. The verdict was seconds away, and I was ready. The gavel hit like thunder, hard and final. The whole room held its breath. The judge's voice followed with clarity and weight, ruling in my favor. The courtroom stirred like someone had cracked a window after years of stale air. I was reinstated as the rightful beneficiary. Every piece I fought to bring forward, the letter, the contract, Mabel's testimony, had been acknowledged. The judge called the actions of the opposing side what they were: deceit. Mabel's soft cry broke through the stillness. I didn't look at her, but I felt it. Relief ran through her like a current. Octavia's face stiffened. Cassius stared down, lips pressed into a thin line. The judge spoke to them, his words firm. Silas, he didn't get jail time, but he'd been given a chance to make things right. I didn't argue that. I stood, nodded, thanked the court. My feet felt firm under me. I walked out upright, without rage, without gloating. Dignity can be quiet like that. On the courthouse steps, I barely reached the pavement before Octavia was on me. Her heels clicked with purpose. Her voice came sharp, almost desperate. "You think you've won? You'll regret this. You tore this family apart." I met her eyes, calm and steady. "No, I just stopped pretending you hadn't already done that." Her lips curled, then she leaned in close like she still had power. "Your mother, she once came to me. She begged me, said you couldn't handle the truth." I stood still. "Then maybe you should have learned what mercy actually means." I didn't wait for her to answer. I walked away. I left her words behind, like old paint peeling off the side of a house. That evening, long after the sun dropped and the noise faded, I heard a knock. Mabel stood at the door, clutching a notebook. I let her in without a word. She sat across from me, her hands resting on the cover like it was something sacred. "I've kept this for years," she said. Her voice was dry, almost ashamed. "It has everything, every lie I heard, every whisper I wasn't supposed to catch." She flipped it open, pages yellowed at the edges, ink faded but legible. Names, dates, plans, secrets. I didn't know how to stop it. I thought maybe if you just married into peace, they'd leave you alone, but they didn't. I looked at her, not as a housekeeper or a witness, but as someone who'd survived in silence. "You didn't inherit this place," she said. "You earned the right to stand in it." My chest tightened. I nodded once. "You're forgiven." That notebook wasn't just confession, it was backup. It gave my truth muscle. The next morning, the sky was still dark when I walked to the mailbox. A single envelope sat inside. My name written in that old, unmistakable hand. Silas. I held it for a while before opening. The letter wasn't long. He didn't beg, didn't justify. Just said he knew he had failed me, that he watched me carry more than I should have. That he hoped the court gave what he couldn't. One sentence stuck. "I watched you rise. I wish I'd helped you climb." I folded the letter carefully, looked out at the edge of the property, whispered, "You helped, just not the way you thought." Some lessons come wrapped in absence. That afternoon, I walked the house one last time, room to room. I touched the walls like checking for breath. I decided what would stay and what would go, literally, metaphorically. I called a contractor to start on the garden first, rip out the rot, let the soil breathe. I told them to leave the old swing. It hung crooked under the oak tree. Let it stay crooked. It had seen too much to be pretty. I sat in the study, called my lawyer, updated my will, said, "No woman under this roof will ever feel like I did." And then I walked outside. The wind had a calm to it, the kind that makes you stop talking. I stood beneath the oak and said out loud, just for me, "This chapter ends here." But I wasn't closing the book. I was finally writing my own.